In this episode of Talking Taboos, the podcast, we're joined by Dr Paula Hall, a sexual and relationship therapist, author, and broadcaster who founded the Laurel Centre and Pivotal Recovery. We talk about the taboo of feeling addicted to porn through the lens of therapy, recovery, and mental health. Paula brings a hopeful and practical perspective to the conversation. We discuss what recovery can actually look like, the role of psychoeducation and self-understanding, and the growing need for accessible support. This episode contains discussion of addiction and mental health. Please listen with care.
Would it be helpful if I just gave you a little rundown of what we're even doing?
Who's
Who
listening?
we are.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. So I'm a creative director at a charity in the UK called Talking Taboos. And every year we run a piece of research with people in the UK to find out the topics that they feel most uncomfortable talking about. So things that they're struggling with, that they're not talking about or getting support with, typically because of things like shame, stigma, embarrassment, etc., that are fueling and feeding the taboo. And this year, we've got two topics that came out as being sort of most urgent, and that was sort of people struggling with compulsive porn use, or their language was feeling addicted to porn. And then the second one is sexual assault by someone like a friend or a peer. So we're now doing a deep dive into each of those things, and we're currently in the deep dive for being addicted to porn. That's where we are, and why we're talking today, to kind of to dig into that a little bit more. I think it would be really useful then if you could, in your own words, sum up the work that you do to someone who has never come across it before, specifically the work you're doing for people who are struggling with compulsive porn use.
My name's Dr Paula Hall. I've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years now and specialising in this space for at least 15, 18 years, so a long time. I have two businesses that work in this space. One is the Laurel Centre, and we're a therapy organisation, 25 therapists working all across the UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland, providing mostly online therapy, counselling for people that are struggling with compulsive porn use, and their partners as well, and we work with couples too, and also more recently set up something called Pivotal Recovery, which is a not-for-profit organisation to provide self-help, because there are a lot of people out there who frankly can't afford therapy or don't feel ready for therapy yet. They kind of want to explore it on their own. They want to see if they can stop on their own. So Pivotal, we've got a completely free version, the Foundations version, or you can spend 95 quid and buy the full 60 version as well. But most people start with Foundations and find that's enough, and then some decide to move on. But partners program on there as well, because the impact on partners of this condition can be really huge.
What is it that someone could expect from that self-help? What does that actually, what are just a few, if you could give me some examples of what that looks like?
So it's a podcast-based resource. It's what we would call psychoeducational. So the Foundations course, for example, is 8 podcasts. So you're listening to yours truly. So if you don't like the sound of my voice, might not be the best thing for you, although it is edited. So it's 8 podcasts, and it starts with, like, the first podcast is really understanding what porn addiction is, really understanding how do I know if this really is an addiction, talking about the neuroscience of it, talking about some of the sort of psychological drivers behind it, as well as giving some really practical strategies for how you can begin to learn what your triggers are, have some practical techniques for kind of avoiding your triggers and having some relapse prevention strategies. So it also includes things like really understanding the impact on your relationships and how you can alter that. Spending more time talking about healthy sexuality. What does healthy sexuality mean to you? Because, of course, this is very different from any other kind of addictive or compulsive behaviour, that this is not about total abstinence. might be about abstinence from pornography, but it's certainly not abstinence from your own sexuality, which should be something that's celebrated and something that you can really enjoy. So we have much more of a kind of deep dive into those tricky topics on the 60 session course. But yeah, it's and there's also a workbook on that course as well. So you can, for example, listen to a session on identifying places that are perhaps dangerous to your recovery. Maybe that's Sunday afternoons, maybe that's being in a certain place, the house being empty, being triggered by somebody you see on the street. But then there's a workbook, so you can open your workbook, virtual workbook on the app, and personalize what you've heard. So you're kind of listening to me and then personalizing the content. And there's some exercises in the workbook. What are your and whatever, how do you feel about, so it gives you a chance to really personalize the content before moving on to the next session.
I'm curious to know a bit more about what healthy porn use looks like, and then when it sort of tips into becoming a problem, whether that's compulsive behavior. I'd like to know what healthy looks and feels like, and then when it's moving away from that and becoming unhealthy.
So it's what we know about porn addiction, and technically it's not an addiction. It's listed by the World Health Organization as an impulse control disorder, but for most people it feels like an addiction, and that's the language they use. And if that's okay by you, then it's okay by me, kind of thing. So what we know about porn addiction is that it's a spectrum disorder. So right down at one end, you've got I don't look at porn at all. It's kind of not really on there. Right the way through at the other end to much more compulsive, addictive use, and a whole range of places in the middle. And of course, with a spectrum, you can move up and down that. So it may be that it's recreational. The function is recreation, pleasure, looking for a bit of sexual relief, and that doesn't have any issues at all. Moving up that scale a bit, it might be that you start using it more for emotional regulation, so maybe stress relief, really stressful time at work, going through a really difficult period, and you start using pornography as a way to switch off and go to sleep, and might become a little bit dependent on it. But actually, you get through the work stress, you get through other things, you decide to have a hot chocolate instead, get into a good Netflix series, whatever. So it just slips back to recreational. But for some people, that kind of using it more for emotional regulation can then build even further into an even stronger dependency, that actually I'm now doing it because it's just kind of what I do. I don't even notice that it's for emotional regulation anymore. So rather than it being about a kind of soothing stress, it's I feel stressed if I don't do it. So that's when you know it's becoming more of a compulsion, that actually I'm beginning to really miss it, and I'm beginning to make excuses to do it, and I'm beginning to create more opportunities when I can, which I didn't used to do before. And then right at the kind of full-on addiction, dysregulated end is where it's having significant problems on your life. It's maybe getting in the way of your relationships. You're late to work because you were looking at porn till 2 o'clock in the morning and barely got any sleep. You're looking at porn rather than spending time with friends, doing other things that are important to you. But in spite of all of that, you still can't stop. So that's kind of right up at the other end.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you've laid out that spectrum really clearly. I think it is interesting to see that tipping point, and in the middle somewhere it can flip between, heading towards more compulsive behavior, then but back to recreational. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you obviously you meet people once they've made the decision to get help for what they're struggling with. Why? What do you think tips people into wanting to get help with it?
I guess the scenario that people kind of assume is that it's when the bottom's fallen out of your life, your partner's you've been blaming stress for why you've been staying up so late for the last however long, and then your partner discovers the porn on your device, and it's chaos. And certainly that's true. For some people, it's because a partner's found out and they've been caught lying basically for a long period of time. Actually, increasingly, we see people more on that kind of spectrum where I'm beginning to notice that this is beginning to be a bit of a problem. And I heard a podcast about it. I heard a podcast and I was listening to it and I was thinking, you know what, I don't want to get to that end. So actually, I'm going to get some help now. We're talking about it more and more people will reach out for help early.
Yeah, I think that's great. They're sort of getting ahead of it because of something they've heard. For those that come to it a bit later, and perhaps have been hiding it for years, a significant amount of time, what is it that stops them from talking about it and from getting help? What's getting in the way there?
So I think it's for some not knowing whether it's a problem or not. Am I just the same as everybody else? We know that vast majority of people look at porn at some stage. What's a normal amount? What's an okay amount? So not really sure whether or not they are different from anybody else. For some people, it's they feel like, well, this is, I know I'm using a lot of porn at the moment, but it's because I'm going through a stressful time at work. And when I get through that stressful time, it will change. Or it's because I'm single at the moment, but when I get into a relationship, I'll stop. So there's an assumption that it will just sort of calm down on its own. And of course, for some people it does, and for others it doesn't. For some people, it's the shame about it. It's feeling weird, feeling weak, feeling I should just be able to stop on my own. I should just be able to get a grip on my own. And feeling a huge amount of shame about getting help.
I suppose that's where the taboo lives, right? And that's what's fueling the taboo, is the shame. Is there anything else that you think comes into why it is a taboo? Why struggling with porn use and compulsive porn use is such a taboo topic, that it is cloaked in shame? What else is going on there?
I mean, in part, it's because it's to do with sex, and we're British and we generally don't talk about sex. I think it's because it's often misunderstood, and it's misunderstood at a number of levels. At the most extreme level, you hear people say, "Oh, porn addicts is it okay for them to be around children?" Kind of some assumption that you are going to be a risk to children or something. The idea that, oh, well, in that case, you must be a risk to women because I've read all this stuff about links between pornography and violence against women and girls. Therefore, you could be an offender. So, those fears. But the opposite end of the scale is don't be stupid. Of course, you're not addicted. Don't be silly. Yeah, it's not a real problem. You don't need to worry about that. It's just normal. It's just fine. So being misunderstood and worrying about, am I getting out of proportion, or will I be seen as being weird or even dangerous?
Are people, you mentioned earlier on that, people can come to you because they've been found out by a partner, and that sense of betrayal and that whole sort of, that's an entire different, I suppose, dynamic that we have to consider here. But do people talk to anyone else? Do they have conversations with friends, family, or are they just, is it the anonymous route? Is it talking to people like yourself? Are they actually talking to people in their lives about it? Is that
no? Almost never. Occasionally, you'll have someone who I did confide in my best mate. I did confide in them, and some people I did finally talk to my partner about it. So it wasn't that they were found out. They volunteered. Look, I know I've been withdrawn. You know that I've not been coming to bed. I need to tell you that I've got a problem with this. I've had a problem with this for quite a long time. So a partner or a best friend, I think a couple of times, mum has been told, particularly if it's a younger guy. But generally nobody knows at all.
I'm curious to know if you've heard of any examples of, confiding in a family member, a best friend, a mum, that's gone well versus that's gone less well, and anything we might learn from that when you open up to someone and how that's received and supported.
Generally, sometimes friends have been, don't be silly, it's not a problem. And some of that I think comes from a good place. Oh, you'll be fine, don't worry about it. And it's the friends wanting to offer reassurance, but they're not not really listening. So sometimes that comes from a good place. I guess where I've heard it not going well at all has been where it's been a partner, and some partners being just so shocked, particularly if you're someone who's anti-porn, if you do not think porn's okay, and that could be for a faith reason or feminist perspective. There's a number of different reasons why people aren't comfortable with it, or feel very much that they've been compared to pornography, or they've been lied to in the past. You told me this and stopped. So sometimes the reaction from partners has been much, much worse than somebody has thought. Um, yeah, and that's kind of down to potentially how well you know your partner in the first place, and how well, whether you've had any conversations at all about it in the past.
Yeah, I suppose if you've not spoken about it at all, you're not really going to know what to expect from that conversation. And then you've got the partner who's taking that on board and feeling a range of emotions, whether that's betrayal, or even, feeling a bit traumatized by it. It's interesting to hear about friends sort of just trying to offer reassurance. I mean, if, for example, there's somebody listening to this who maybe they suspect that a friend of theirs is struggling with their porn use, and they're feeling like they want to just check in and say something, what advice would you give someone wanting to give that support, and how they could go about doing that in a way that feels safe and feels supportive and not judgmental or just sort of minimizing it?
I guess it's. I mean, I think an outright question. I'm worried about you. You seem a bit withdrawn. Is this having an impact on this person? Well, you don't seem to spend as much time with the rest of us as much as you used to. And I guess you can start a bit softer with, are you spending more time online than you want to? Because do you definitely know it's porn, or might it be gaming or gambling or something? But yeah, are you online a lot more than you want to be? Porn can be really problematic for a lot of people. Heard this podcast the other day. It's a real problem for lots of people, and I'm here if I can help in any way. But I think it's starting with, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned.
And then should that person say, well, oh yeah, actually, I am struggling with this, I think to sit with that and respond, right? So what comes next? What does being a supportive friend look like in
Yeah.
that moment?
I think probably you might need to assume that they'll go, no, 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 and they'll deny it. And often that will be a knee-jerk reaction. If you do get that response, say, okay, I could be wrong, totally get that, totally appreciate that. But, if you want to talk about it, if it's on reflection, you think that maybe that is part of it, then I'm here to make sure the door is still open. Even if someone has just gone, no, not at all. What makes you think that? Why would you think that of me? What are you trying to say? It expects that you might get a defensive response. And often that comes because of shame. It's the shame that fuels that defensive position. So yeah, be ready for that and say, oh, okay, yeah, I might be wrong, but yeah, you know where I am. Door's always open.
And then hope that at a later point, maybe they'll then feel able to come and talk about it. Yeah. It's sort of opening that door, and you might not get the conversation right away. It could come later. Yeah, that's absolutely fair enough. Any advice in terms of what wouldn't be helpful to say, or things to avoid if, should they come to you at a later time and confide? Anything to avoid doing that would reinforce shame or sort of put them back into, keeping it to themselves and struggling on their own?
I guess, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that is, don't try and come in with just quick solutions. So, why don't you just put some porn blockers on and then that'll be fine? Because chances are, by the time someone has opened up to you, they've probably tried a lot of the straightforward things. It's like, yeah, tell me something I didn't know. I think probably asking, how can I help you with that? What would be useful? And sometimes it is, put porn blockers on for me, you hold the password, invite me down to spend time with you, you know. But I think it's, in terms of not reinforcing the shame, I think you need to listen first, not come up with quick answers, but actually listen first, be curious, ask questions. How long do you think this has been a problem? You probably don't need to ask what kind of thing are you looking at. That's probably unnecessary information. If this was someone saying, I think I'm drinking too much, you wouldn't say, is it vodka or is it beer that you're drinking? It'd be like, how is that relevant? So yeah, I don't think you need to ask those forensic questions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like not needing
Yeah.
to go into the detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think then my next question is potentially really complicated because of the dynamics. But if this is a conversation happening between partners, because obviously the partner's dealing with their own hurt potentially and their own emotions and reactions to what they're hearing, how can those conversations feel safer and more supportive? It feels like it's a whole other challenge because you've got a whole another dimension
Yeah.
into that conversation.
I think if you're the partner, and it varies so much, because if you have been lied to repeatedly, then understandably you are not going to be at that moment in time be full of compassion.
Of course,
You've
yeah.
you've lied to me. I think the for partners, it's not your responsibility to fix them. I think you're entitled to have your response. The best thing really for both of you is a response that is, okay, I hear what you're saying. I think you probably need to get some help. And I'm not sure I'm the best person for that because frankly, I'm feeling a bit livid. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling whatever it is. I need to deal with my stuff. I need to deal with my feelings, and work that out because that's probably not going to help you. And you need to get yourself sorted. And I need to know what you're doing to get some help for it. So yeah, if you're a partner listening to this, it's not your job to try and fix them. If it was your partner confiding in you about their alcohol use, then you would probably say things like, well, maybe you say, is it helpful if I don't drink in front of you? Do we need to cut back? Do we need to do this, that, and the other? So, I mean, certainly if you have been watching porn together, you might say, oh, that's probably not very helpful for you. But that very much depends on your own attitudes around porn. But generally, it's very, very secretive. It really is quite different, as I said. And there's that element of betrayal that partners feels that makes it very different.
I'd like to think a little bit more about people right now who aren't talking about this, who are, I suppose, sitting in that shame and not wanting to talk to someone about it. Um, what what would you say to someone who's listening to this, who is struggling with their porn use alone and they're sitting with it alone? Maybe they've taken some steps, maybe they haven't, but someone who feels quite stuck with where they are, what would you say to them?
It's complicated how these things get set up. I think it is, this is not about weakness. This is not about a lack of self-control. This will be about a whole load of other factors that have all kind of conspired against you. For most people, there is some underlying tension, underlying reason that has contributed to this, but it will have built over time. Um, you're not alone. It's not a character failing or a character weakness. I think the more we can see this as a mental health problem, or at least a symptom of a problem. Um, so really, like all addictive and unwanted behaviours, are symptoms of not being able to manage other things in life very well. But what happens over a period of time, from a neurological perspective, is that your brain actually begins to rewire. So what we know, and this has been very simplistic, but what we know is that if you keep returning to the same behavior all the time as a way of self-soothing, your brain becomes dependent on that for self-soothing, and other things don't work as well. So maybe you used to watch, Netflix, you would have done a Sudoku, you would have called a mate or whatever, but those things aren't working really anymore. And the more that you engage in that behavior, the more you begin to crave it. And rather than engaging in the behavior for pleasure, to enjoy it, you're engaging in the behavior to get rid of the craving. So what a lot of people say is, I don't want to do it. I don't really enjoy doing it. I don't know why I do it, but there's this overwhelming sense that I'm probably going to do it at some stage this weekend because I always do, and I don't know how to stop myself. So I'm going to do it now so I can get it over and done with, get rid of this horrible brain fog, and get on with my life. But that's kind of a perpetual cycle because that just reinforces it. So you just do it even more. And I think that's why the psychoeducational piece is really important, because once you can really understand, oh, that's why I keep on doing something I don't even particularly enjoy and don't want to do. Once you can understand it, that begins to reduce the shame and you can begin to get some tools to overcome it. But generally, people that haven't overcome it yet, it's not because you're doing the wrong thing, it's because you haven't worked out what the problem is. So you're using the wrong tools for the problem, as it were.
Let's say that message sits with someone now and they are thinking about doing something differently. Are there any because I think taking big steps can seem a bit too much, and like jumping straight into finding a therapist, for example, can feel too much for someone. What are kind of the smaller steps that people can take to start their journey out of their struggle and to get support? What are those smaller things?
Well, definitely go and look at pivotalrecovery.org. Download the foundations course on your phone and be very discreet. That will give you a lot more information. And I think as soon as we start really gathering the information, it helps us feel more empowered. Even if you don't want to do anything now. So this is the other thing that happens is you get people who go, okay, I think I've probably got a problem, but I don't really want to do anything about it yet. So when I get through these exams, when I get through this, when I'm, at the back end of summer, when I get back from holiday, whatever, then I will. But get the information, find out what it is that you will need to do when you're ready, and get knowledge. Knowledge is power. That's Find out what it is that you're up against.
Getting an understanding of the situation and the problem that you're in, because you're coming from it from a very personal perspective, but to just get that wider view must feel incredibly empowering to get that overview. I have one final question for you, and you maybe sit with it for a minute before answering. But if you had a magic wand to kind of to stop the taboo in its tracks from doing what it does, the shame, the stigma, the fear of judgment, persecution, etc., or, being branded someone that's not safe around children, for example, as you mentioned earlier, if you had a magic wand to stop that from working how it is, what would you be prioritizing? What would you be wishing for?
It goes down to talking about it more. One of the things I've been doing a lot of work with Land Bible and Movember about particularly men and boys' mental health, because this is an issue that affects them more. We need government resources. We need platforms out there. We need info. It needs to be talked about in schools. Just porn is a part of everyday life now. Has been for a while. AI porn's going to change the world as well. It needs to be a standard part of education from young, part of standard sex education. Porn's out there, need to be a bit careful. Early intervention. Keep talking.
We've been working in a collaboration with Brooke, the sexual being charity, and they obviously, have been working with young people about porn use, and I think they framed it really well, and that this is, as you learn about the risks of other sexual health topics and sexual health and well-being, porn use should absolutely be a part of that conversation as well, and like the risks, and on helping young people to know what's healthy, when it's for entertainment, for example, when it is recreational, and then when it's tipping into something else. I think that's coming through a lot in this deep dive, is getting the education in age appropriate as soon as you can. What about, so we've obviously got generations of people who haven't had that education, who are where they are. They've been through the experience of increased exposure, increased accessibility to porn over the years, as as digital platforms have changed and evolved and enabled people to access it incredibly easily, people who are, adults later in life, what can we do for them who have had a much longer journey with porn?
I think we can still get the resources out there about pornography. So we obviously, it's a tricky one. We have the gambling aware campaigns now. Do we have porn aware campaigns? I think there are. Yeah, there are, adult things, and I don't mean the sexual adult stuff. But although wouldn't that be great if we could actually get social media and the porn industry to take some responsibility and start talking about it as well in the same way as Gambling Aware have done. But yeah, I mean, again, it just all comes back down to education and us talking about it more. And as I say, I've been involved in this for a long time now, and we are making progress. I'm doing more and more of these things. We still have the sensational headlines, which aren't always helpful. But yeah, getting more balanced conversations out there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been so useful to get your perspective, and just actually really reassuring to hear you reinforce some of the things that we've heard from other people, but from your perspective as someone who's helping people with this. So incredibly honoured to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Very welcome.
If any of the experiences in this conversation have resonated with you, please know you're not alone. When you are ready, there are people you can talk to and places you can turn to for support. You can call Samaritans for free on 116 123 or visit Mind at mind.org.uk for information and support. For help with feeling addicted to porn, you can find free support through Pivotal Recovery, Sex Addicts Anonymous UK, and The Naked Truth. You can also find information and education about porn through Brooke and The Mix for under 25s. Links and details are in the show notes.